All right, what's up, brothers? Welcome to episode number 69. Lucky number 69 of the Before the Trainwreck series. I'm joined today again by Jonathan Noble. If you guys caught the episode a few weeks ago, we talked pretty in depth on divorce law, and also Paul from Apex Mindset, who does talk a lot about narcissism and dealing with covert narcissists on his channel. So I thought it would be good to have him on as well. So welcome back, gentlemen.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Rich.
And also, if you didn't see the episode I did with Paul on the Playing to Win series, we were talking about the making of Chad Thunder Cockadoodle-Doo, which was kind of a fun one. So you can go check that out later. That one did get demonetized rather quickly, by the way, but whatever. We had fun. Right. All right. So tonight's topic, we're jumping into breaking up with a covert narcissist, why that's difficult, and I think it's important to deal with it from the perspective of family law, because untying the knot is pretty tough to begin with, let alone if you're trying to untie a knot where you've invited the state into your home to decide what happens to your access to your children and your assets. You're involving a lawyer for sure in something like this, and it can get very, very difficult. John, you had kind of a minute warm up to covert narcissism and why it's important to identify that. Why don't you kind of hop into that?
Yeah, all I want to basically say, just on the front end of this, this isn't legal advice. Licensed in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, but only your lawyer with whom you have an attorney-client relationship with can give you legal advice. So with that said, I just want to give you a little bit of a visual on how a narcissist thinks, and it's a great segue into what we're going to talk about. And again, I also wanted to mention that an ounce of prevention when dealing with a covert narcissist is worth 10 tons of cure. So you want to go into any sort of relationship or marriage with your eyes wide open, looking clearly through the right lens. But people learn different ways. So instead of just chatting about it, I wanted to illustrate how a narcissist looks at you. And you need to be really aware of this. Basically, say this cup is you. You're what's known as narcissistic supply to a narcissist. So say I'm a narcissist, just for the purpose of this video, and this is you. Basically, they will take your admiration, your love, your money, your finances, everything that you have access to, okay? And they look at you like a supply. And when they quench their thirst for narcissistic supply, that's what happens to you. And you don't want to find yourself in a position where you marry this person and then you can't unmarry them after you find out they're a narcissist. So again, you want to look at things with a clear lens. When they're done throwing you away, almost literally throwing you away, then they get their new person, their new narcissistic supply. Take their money, admiration, love. They never really love you back. They only love the way that you make them feel. So when they're done with your narcissistic supply, it couldn't be more clear. And if you're listening to this in a podcast, I just took the cups and threw them over my shoulder. After they throw the next person away, same thing, new supply. They're always on the prowl for a new supply to give them love, admiration, money, whatever it is. So you need to be careful. And if you are thirsty at all for affection, or you're thirsty to get into a relationship, you're prone to get tripped up and to get into one of these relationships or marriages. So be careful. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a good illustration. I think it's probably one of the best that I've seen.
That is the best illustration that I've seen. That's really good.
Thank you. Everybody learns differently. So if you're watching this, rather than just say the words, I couldn't think of a better way to illustrate what you're up against.
I don't think I have taken a look at the comments from that video in a few weeks, but one of the ones that popped up a couple of times was, Jonathan, they called you the Albert Einstein of the red pill.
Thank you. If I could say
that's actually a pretty significant compliment.
Thank you.
So let's start diving into this, because you've got a whole bunch of talking notes over here, and I've got some notes here from a mutual friend that both Paul and I have been trying to help through his divorce as well. And I think that many of these are going to be hit on with the talking points that you have here. Let's define what a covert narcissist looks like. Paul, I want to start with you because Jonathan gave us the visual, with the cup. So, what do you see covert narcissist as?
Okay, so covert narcissist falls in line with. Well, I'm going to disclaimer though first here. Jonathan has a disclaimer. I'll have mine. I'm not in the business of treating mental disorders. Okay, I'm not a clinician who does that. That's not my job. My job with Apex Mindset is I help men, in the relationship side of it, have a better relationships with women. Oftentimes, this means that this comes into play. Dealing with BPD, narcissist, or any of what is called cluster B personality disorder, which is the DSM-5, which is your psychological diagnostic manual, has antisocial personality disorder, histrionics, narcissists, and BPD all rolled up in those classifications of disorders. Now, here's the thing:
psychopathy still in that group?
Psychopathy is usually considered part of antisocial personality disorder. But what we have now, because they're finding there's a lot of controversy with these diagnoses. There's a lot of disagreements on the origin of these disorders, how they manifest, and what, if you can treat them, how to treat them. So here's a couple of different ways of looking at it. One is to look at them as on a spectrum. So there are some, for example, when we look at BPD, which is a little bit different than covert narcissism, but oftentimes somebody will diagnose as both. You know what I mean? They could be on a light end of the spectrum where they're just not as severe, and maybe something like dialectical behavioral therapy could help them. Or they could be on the very severe side where they have what's called psychopathic traits, or heavily narcissistic traits where they're probably unhelpable. So when we look at psychopathy, we're looking at usually traits of, and we can define that as somebody who's overtly willing to hurt someone else intentionally to win. That's generally what can classify psychopathy. Whether they're going to do their choice and how they'll do that is going to depend on other factors. But could it be violent? Sure. Could it be just more administrative violence, like in a workplace? Sure. Could it be within the context of a marriage and dragging someone through a terrible divorce and making things as difficult for them as possible, or calling the police and making a false report, because, saying that she was hit or whatever, getting this guy thrown in jail. There's a lot of things that fall in line with psychopathy, but if you think willing to harm somebody else, overtly, narcissists, covert narcissists, BPD will hurt people with their behavior, but it's not always intentional to win. These people will take it to a level, though, where it's intentional. And so that's on the other end of the spectrum, the more extreme end of the spectrum. So if you look at it as a spectrum, that's helpful. The supply model that Jonathan illustrated is the best model because it covers all of the disorders. What's happening is there is a inability for them to bond with you like a normal human being. And so you have to treat them differently than you would a normal person. They don't have the bonding mechanisms for whatever reason. Some of those traits within the disorder are causing them to not be able to bond. And it's usually a flaw in how they see themselves. They have just a flawed sense of self for whatever reason, whether it's BPD or narcissism. And so what they have to do is they have to get what's called supply, which is your time, energy, effort at your detriment in order to fulfill their need to see or understand their value in the world, and to supply what we call supply their sense of self. This idea of supply has been around for a very long time, and it seems to be the best way to understand it. If you understand how supply works, then you understand their motivation, because people will go, well, how come she's creating this crazy argument? It's really toxic when she was nice to me yesterday. Well, what she's doing is she's getting your time, energy, and effort at your detriment. And that is fulfilling. She can get you in a toxic argument and to do things you never would do ordinarily. She is getting that is getting your time, energy, and effort. So she must be really important. You know what I mean? If she is able to get you to lose your stuff and throw a brick through a window, or you know what I mean? If she gets you to behave in certain ways. And so that's really important in understanding it. But yeah. So anyways, classifying covert narcissism. So sorry, I'm going already too long here, but covert narcissism a little different. It's really sneaky. Like when you look at grandiose narcissism, and I'm not going to go through all 9 traits because you can look them up on the internet and it'll just take a lot of time, but you can look at the traits. You know, there's 9 traits. They fulfill 5 out of the 9. They could be classified as narcissists. And again, these are on a spectrum. You know what I mean? In other words, it's a level of severity. You know, so fantasies, for example, everyone has fantasies, but how severe and out of touch with reality are the fantasies, for example. But what the covert narcissist does is they play the victim. So it really catches you by surprise. They're getting that supply and sucking your energy and time by I'm so broken, I'm so harmed by someone else, I need you to save me. They tend to be shy and withdrawn when we think of narcissists as being, you know, more extroverted and look at me, I'm so cool, like a grandiose narcissist. They're more shy and withdrawn. They have more propensity for depression, anxiety, and just an overall empty feeling inside of them. And they're trying to fulfill this empty feeling with you as the partner. And that's where they get you as supply. And I've run into so many men, especially military men I've worked with. It's like they're just fodder for this person because they want to save. Military dudes want to save women, you know? And so she comes in there, I need to be saved. You know, my life would be so great. I'm so awesome really on the inside, but my last partner was abusive or I had a bad childhood. You know, these are the things that will come up, but you're the source of her save. You're going to save her. That's what it is. And then when she doesn't get any better and things are, you know, not okay with her, it's because you didn't talk to her the right way, or because you took too long to text her back, or you see what I'm saying? So now it's your fault she can't get any better. And so she plays the victim, sucks your time and energy away, gets you to devalue yourself during this devaluation phase. And just like in the illustration with the cup, you get discarded when she can't get any more supply from you, and she goes to move on with the next partner. Whether you're married or not.
And that Paul kind of dovetails into these 15 odd points that John kind of prepared for this show about establishing some signs and clues, like some red flags that you're dealing with somebody that's got a narcissistic personality trait underlying anyway. John, do you want to kind of like walk through the main ones that you've seen? I mean, like you would have seen a lot of these in, you know, divorce law on a day-to-day basis with what you're doing. So which ones pop up the most for you?
Yeah, I just want to back up for 1 second. There's 3 stages that a covert narcissist operates in. And the first one is love bombing. So in order to recognize that there's a covert narcissist in your midst, anybody that just over the top love bombs you, they are interested in everything you're interested in. They want to be with you. They rush to the relationship stage right away. Watch out, because that love bombing will bring you in like a black widow spider, will pull you into that web.
Have you ever heard a woman say that I want to glue myself to you because she always wants to be around you?
Actions sometimes say that too. Yeah. You got to be careful. Be careful, because that is a huge red flag, and that's the first stage, that love bombing. And it feels good, especially if you haven't been with someone in a while and you want to be with a woman.
That's where it gets most guys, right? Because they're not particularly or highly successful on the sexual marketplace, and it's like all of a sudden somebody shows up out of the blue that just like gets them and just loves them for who they are, or so they think.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. So that first stage, love bombing, watch out. Don't get roped in. And then, of course, the second stage is devaluation, which we'll talk about, and then the discard. But in order to answer your question, some of the traits you're going to see in these folks is they're overly competitive. They're jealous. She might say something to you like, "Did you see what Rita got for Valentine's Day from Doug? What did you get me? What have you gotten me lately?" I mean, that's unhealthy. And that's a narcissistic kind of mindset. One other thing, just a general statement, Paul's right. These folks are hollow inside. I liken them to the chocolate Easter bunny, where they look really good on the outside, but on the inside, they're hollow. They're afraid. They're fragile. They're nasty. And you don't find out sometimes until it's too late. So the goal is get your radar up and listen and observe. That's your best friend in this case. Another thing is they're overly concerned with their appearance. Hair extensions, a ton of makeup. That's not necessarily indicative of having narcissistic personality disorder. People put themselves together pretty well. But if they're over the top about it, get a closer look and make sure that there's not other things that would indicate narcissistic personality disorder. They're materialistic. They're all about what you drive, that Prada or Gucci handbag. That is another indicator that there could be narcissistic personality disorder. One humongous indicator is they have a superiority complex. Everything they have, everything they do, every trip they take is better than yours, better than everybody else's. They only care about appearances. They never live in the moment. They're all worried about, how can I curate a photo to put on my social media so everybody sees me in this pose? That's a pretty good indicator. Not any one thing in and of itself will define a narcissistic person, but in aggregate, they start to add up and you're getting a good sense that you could be in a bad situation. People who have narcissistic personality disorder will think that everyone's jealous of them, that it's like grandiose, and that's like an outward sign. So beware of that. And you're listening and you're observing as time goes by. You're spending time with someone and dating them. Narcissists, especially covert narcissists, overly critical to any criticism you may have of them, no matter how minor. They blow up, even if it's an innocent thing. But boy, can they dish it out during the devaluation stage. They'll tell you they don't like everything about you. But if you dare respond in kind and say anything negative that could be construed as critical, they blow up beyond belief. That's something to really watch out for. She's a drama queen, all right? I don't know about you guys, but I'm pretty sure you don't have any room for drama. There's enough drama out there. There's a ton of drama in my life, in my work life, but I don't tolerate any outside of it. Nobody should. It just creates stress. You'll never be the best version of yourself. You don't need it. So if somebody's all about drama or they manufacture drama, get a close look and observe. They like to do what's known as triangulation, where they'll pit family members and friends against each other. They incorporate what's known as flying monkeys on their side to try to badmouth you or look at you in a bad light. That's a huge red flag. Not only is that immature, but that is indicative of covert narcissistic personality. So be careful of that. You don't want to get tangled up in that, because it's just a matter of time until she triangulates people against you and badmouths you. So watch what they do. Covert narcissist, shameless disregard for boundaries. She could do whatever she wants. Shows up late, says she's going to do something, no follow-up, but God forbid you do, and all hell breaks loose. You don't want to deal with somebody like that. They practice what's known as gaslighting, where they have you wonder whether or not you're really in touch with reality. You could have a conversation with them an hour ago, and then they'll deny ever having it or deny saying what they said. You almost want to record them and play it back and say, yes, you did. You said exactly that. So it's known as gaslighting. It's a horrible tactic that narcissists seem to be pretty good at. Don't fall for it. Stand firm. It doesn't get better.
I just want to add to your point on over competition and jealousy. You made the point of Rita got such and such from a husband. What did you get me? I also call that when she compares somebody else's best to your worst, right? Meaning like, well, Jeff doesn't leave his socks on the floor, so why do I have to pick up your socks, right? But Jeff makes like no money compared to what you bring to the table, sort of thing. Like that's somebody that's like really flicking boogers at you from an unnecessary place,
Right.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There's some great points here, and I think what I'll do is I'll copy and paste these into the show notes as well, so everybody can read them.
Good idea.
Afterwards.
Absolutely.
I think we
Absolutely.
covered the most. She has a constant need for validation, long series of broken relationships. That's another really, really good point is serial daters with a really high notch count. It's pretty difficult to establish notch count. Guys typically lie about theirs. They'll make it twice as big as what it is, and women usually tend to have it or maybe even cut it by 2/3. But you can usually tell by, Paul, what do you think's a good way, if you can kind of distill it to figure out what a woman's notch count is?
Times whatever they say by 35. No, I'm just kidding. Well, what I look for is behaviors. So because it doesn't intrinsically matter. We look, all right, we know notch count is an indicator of an inability to pair bond over time. That's what the research shows, right?
Yeah.
We know that high notch count you're treating people like they're disposable commodities, which is a common place for narcissist or BPD people. So it correlates. We know that about notch count. The problem is they're never going to be honest about their notch count, particularly during the love bombing phase that Jonathan talked about, and he illustrated the 3 phases of a narcissistic abuse relationship. So what I look for is behaviors, and even when they talk about things in their past or history, things that would indicate inability to pair bond. So for example, is she a serial dater who went from boyfriend to boyfriend, was never single? Or
a lot of the times you never hear
through...
about that, but I mean, if there's a complete absence of any kind of a long-term relationship, and it's like, well, I lived in Argentina, and then I was in Georgia for a bit, and I spent some time in Asia, and it's like, you get a lot of moving around where there's no stability and consistency.
Right.
They're usually moving around on somebody else's dime, right?
Of course. No long-term. Now, this is not something that's particularly in the relationship, but they don't have good long-term or long-standing friendships is a pretty good indicator, because they burn their bridges with their friends and their family as they kind of go along through life. And so they don't have anybody that they've known for 20 years or 10 years, you know what I mean, or since they were a teenager, that sticks around for very long. That's just on the friendship side. But I look for one thing that's a really good indicator is if they talk about or had a painful breakup and then took a break from dating for a while. Because what that demonstrates is that they had an ability to pair bond. So they were bonded to this person. They had a painful breakup. It hurt them. And so instead of running out and jumping on the carousel and trying to fulfill their need with their supply need, potentially if a narcissist with all of these other dudes' body parts, they're instead taking a break, right? Because they're hurt by that and they're not sure where to go next. And so they bury themselves and they take 4, 5, 6 months of not dating, not being with anybody. And if they volunteer that information, if you create an environment where, and you should do this during the plate spinning or dating phases, where you create an environment where women are open to talk to you without and feeling free of judgment, so if you just are able to just kind of create an environment where they don't feel like they're being judged, and that they're being accepted, they'll tell you things. And a normal girl will tell you too about things that where they've made mistakes, which I know women don't often. Personal accountability is kind of a handicap for a lot of women, even who are not diagnosable. But a good strong indicator if someone's a little bit more self-aware might say talk about mistakes they've made. A narcissist won't do that, especially a covert narcissist is going to be the victim always. BPD women, they're usually always the victim. They're not going to say that they did this or that, or you know what I mean? If they they mentioned that they've cheated before, for example, the guy would have deserved it. Or I cheated, but I mean, he was abusive to me, and what else did you expect me to do? You know what I mean? It's going to be all the excuses for their bad behavior and how they're still a good person, even despite their bad behavior. Now, women kind of do that anyway. They need to be the good chimpanzee, I call it. They need to be seen by the social circles as being a good person. That's an instinctual drive, but they will do it to a level where there's just no personal accountability at all. That's
there's a lot of
red
mental
flag.
gymnastics that they'll jump through in their head. They'll
Right.
they'll jump through a lot of hoops. I mean, basically, whatever number you get, you can multiply it by essentially 2 or 3. We got to catch up on a few of these super chats here because they're starting to pile in here. Neo, who's a regular viewer, thanks for that, dude. He says, "Evening, gents. What are some of the causes for a woman to become a narcissist? Having daddy issues be her cause, and are narcissists very insecure, fragile egos?" Well, we've already talked about ego and insecurity. You might have joined a little bit later, but yeah, that's part of it. Daddy issues is more tied into borderline personality disorder. Paul, John, what do you guys think to this question?
So can I jump in on the borderline thing?
Sure.
Because, so it's when you're trying to divorce somebody like this or not get in the relationship, understand that you're making an assessment based on what you know about the diagnostic criteria and their behaviors and these signs. You're not actually diagnosing them, right? A professional is going to diagnose them for the purpose of treatment. That's not that important. What's important is that you recognize these red flags and then don't get into it with them. Who cares if they're a covert narcissist or BPD or what, or both? You know what I mean? Like, the exact diagnosis is completely, inconsequential to you. You're just trying to assess whether or not this person is this type or not. And then when divorcing them, because you need to know if they're this type, because that's going to frame how you behave and your decisions and how you interact with them, versus if they're a cooperative partner where the relationship just went bad. So that's really different. But just for sake of understanding, BPD women, they tend to they play the victim, but they do really feel bad about themselves, whereas narcissists actually feel good about themselves and victimized by other people saying otherwise. You know what I mean? So that's so a BPD person will feel bad about themselves, and then you victimize them by not paying enough attention to them or whatever behavior they decide. And so that means that they must hurt you because you're a terrible person who would kick someone while they're down, right? Whereas the covert narcissist is like, well, you are trying to victimize me, and I'm this wonderful, great person. How could you do that to such a good person like myself? I'm now going to harm you because you're obviously a bad person. So they will harm you, or they will try to harm you and do behaviors that will, create this toxic, devaluation process. But it comes from a little bit different place. You know what I mean? And that's kind of important to recognize, I guess. I mean, it's, kind of here nor there too. Like, it really doesn't matter if they're devaluing you after a love bombing phase. That's a sign that you're in this dynamic and you need to leave.
What about you, John? What do you see in law when you're dealing with divorce, as far as any origin to narcissism? Is there any
So much of it
common
is
denominator?
Yeah, it's a great question. Here's part of the problem. Narcissists don't think anything is wrong with them. It's all everybody else's fault.
Yeah.
So these narcissistic folks go undiagnosed. I'm not sure what the literature says in terms of the origin of how this develops, but I do believe it's early in life, in the formative years, either through a traumatic event or some other event, sometimes through divorce or parent dies, and they are just a shell of a human being inside. They're very fragile, and that they can't change either. It's not the kind of thing where it's very difficult to change. Take a lot of analysis to strip somebody down, get to the root of the reason why they have narcissistic personality disorder. And a lot of these folks are in mid-age, middle years, and you're not going to cure it.
And guys, you have to remember, what he said there is that they don't see the problem that they have. And for you to deal with the problem that you have, how does an alcoholic deal with their drinking problem? They first recognize they have a drinking problem. If you're dealing with a narcissist and you want to swoop in to try to save her, don't think you're going to be successful because you've got good intent that you're trying to save her. If she doesn't see that the problem exists, there's going to be no improvement whatsoever. Let me grab this super chat here from Bearded Dutchman. But before I read that out, I just wanted to point out, like, I've published this chapter, for my email list on red flags, and off this list that you've presented here, John, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 of these are in my red flag chapter. So if you're paying attention, or if you're looking for red flags as you're dating, as you're spinning plates, or going about your life, and you can identify them, and you learn what they are, and you move them, into a category where it's like do not go zone, you should be okay. It's just a matter of approaching women from the perspective that they can be dangerous. There's that old saying, I'm sure John's heard it, but not every woman will destroy a man in divorce court, but every woman can, right? The Bearded Dutchman here says, sent a few euros, thanks brother. He says, all that has been said is like a script to the letter for a relationship that I had. So I'm so glad you guys are talking about this, especially for others. Yeah, like that's the plan. Like that's what we're doing here. We're trying to make sure that other people don't make the same mistakes that we may have, or of like other men that we've dealt with or worked with in the past. Jalil Watson sends a very generous $50 super chat. Thanks. Please don't leave out the codependency attracts a narcissist. I've done a lot of healing in this. Yeah. I think he had... no, that wasn't him that followed up. So
I'd like to jump in if I could
please.
On this.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is a fantastic piece of information. If you stand firm and you move with intention and you say no and you stand your ground, the narcissist is going to freak out, but at least they'll expose themselves. Remember, this is all about prevention too. You want that mask off of that narcissist as soon as possible, because you don't want to get deeper into a relationship with them. You certainly don't want to marry them and then be at the mercy of the family courts. So you can't be codependent. Most people are pretty nice, even if they're quote alpha, if somebody's a victim and you can help them and you have the resources, but narcissists will take such advantage of your kindness, you'll find yourself in a place you don't want to be. So don't be codependent. That it starts there, and that's a great point.
Paul?
Yeah, so codependency, it's important to understand that it's not just some weak guy who is going to, be codependent. A lot of people with very alpha behaviors and alpha traits have these fantasies about saving women, you know what I mean? And saving victims and stuff like that. I know this, again, from the military. That was a big common denominator. Guys with that kind of hero archetype, they wanted to, they were willing to fight, and these are very strong guys, and they knew how to set standards for themselves, all this stuff, and then found themselves being roped into these relationships. And what happens is, it happens during the love bombing phase. This person makes themselves into the perfect mate. So if you understand how supply works, again, it's like, to get your supply in the beginning, they have to get you to want them. You know what I mean? To want to be with them, to dedicate. So now they're on their best behavior, and they're finding all of your trigger points that are going to make you attracted to them, drawn to them, desiring them, so that they can exploit those later on during devaluation. And that's not because they have this grand plan or they're super intelligent and they're going to figure out how to screw you over. It's just because that's where the supply is coming from. Here's this guy who's a strong person who doesn't quite want me yet. Maybe he got a phone number, whatever, but he's not quite, dedicating his whole life to trying to be with me and marry me. So let me be his perfect mate. And then, you draw into her web, you draw into this whole thing. Now there's no place else to go. You've dedicated yourself to her. You are in love with her. It's the perfect person. It's the best person you've ever been with. They're throwing sex at you. They're throwing a lot of things at you. And so what that actually does is it gets you neurochemically addicted. So it's actually very similar to what we see in gambling addictions. I talked to a person who's a doctor in sociology and an addiction expert. And when he was telling me about how gamblers have addictions to gambling, I saw that this is very similar to men and how they're addicted to these types of relationships. Because for a gambler, it's not even the win anymore that is the motivation. It's not like, oh yeah, I won. The win is kind of anticlimactic. It's getting themselves out of the loss and digging themselves out of the hole. And so during that love bombing phase, they get all these happy neurochemicals. Then during devaluation, she starts taking away those feelings with her behavior, and then starts sprinkling them back in to keep you sort of going. And from a Pavlovian behavioral perspective, this gets people and animals, in fact, to, if you're doing animal training, to try harder with intermittent rewards and to have more of a heavy chemical hit when they get the reward. And now, after being devalued for so long, it's not even the reward of those happy feelings. It's the reward of just not feeling bad anymore. And so that's where that sort of, and they're addicted to trying to dig themselves out of this hole with this person. And they're trying to, and that all goes back to codependency and them trying to save her, because she will use guilt and use shaming to make you feel as if, gosh, everything could be so wonderful if only you would do more. If only you would do something different. And that's just where they get you. And that's where you become, even if you weren't codependent before, because of the neurochemical addiction, you start to become that way. You know, so you really have to not only, when getting out of this, follow advice from an attorney so you have an objective source for getting out of it without your feelings getting involved. But it's also good to start doing some stuff for your mental health, because you are addicted to this person. And this is the biggest thing I see is guys don't do, the answer is actually really easy, how to get out of these things, more or less. Complicated with a divorce, but that's the attorney's problem to solve. He's the one who knows what to do legally. Just follow his directions. It's not that hard. Just do what you're told and get the hell out of it, right? They don't do it though, because of this addiction. That's the problem, and this codependency.
All right,
Anyway.
let's hit this last super chat here from Dell. Sent a very generous $50. Thanks, brother. He says, was engaged to a covert. It took me a year of ups and downs of this cycle he described. It's up to the individual to realize and educate yourself to realize what she's doing to you. Broke it off and told her to choke on the ring. Daddy issues always. Yeah, I don't know.
Dodged a bullet.
Yeah,
He
like
dodged a bullet.
some people will probably criticize me for saying this, but the amount of time that you might get drawn through fighting to try to get that ring back, that $5,000, $10,000, $7,000, whatever it costs you, it might actually be better off just say, keep it, choke on it, I'm done, and you can just ghost her and get out of the way. As long as you don't have kids together, you can move on. As soon as you've tied the knot and you've had kids, the entire scenario changes completely. You've got a lot more work to go through to untie that one. John, I was curious, and I wanted to ask you this on the broadcast anyway, but what are some examples of some of the worst that you've seen in your practice that men have gone through trying to untie the knot with a covert narcissist?
Well, you got to remember that one characteristic of covert narcissists is they hate to lose no matter what. They have to feel superior. So if you're in the middle of a divorce and you've worked very hard, you've built businesses, you're the moneyed spouse, they will fight over an avocado peeler or an old urinated on rug that her chihuahua peed on. And then her lawyer will write me a letter, and then I would have to write a letter back. It's hundreds of dollars, if not more. It's a mess. They'll never agree. A simple example is they don't agree to mediate anything. They won't arbitrate. Everything's got to go through litigation. You just want to get rid of them. So I'm going to again say that ounce of prevention, if you look through a clear lens, don't have one-itis. And I can tell you from my personal experience, I've dated covert narcissists, and a couple things saved me. For what it's worth, I wasn't dating them exclusively. So when they went into the devaluation stage and the mask came off, I was like, I don't care. There was no love lost. You revealed yourself. Yahoo. So guys, don't have such tunnel vision. Also focus on yourself. You'll definitely become a better version of yourself, and you won't have that thirst that I see some guys have. They get married to covert narcissists and they don't find out it's too late. So, don't have that tunnel vision, because you're going to be abused. And once you enter that marital contract, you're out of luck. even if you have a great prenup, she's going to try to fight that too. It could stand up depending upon your jurisdiction, but that's for another topic for another day. I've seen people who will burn the earth and spend more money litigating an issue than it's worth, and it's horrible.
Burn it right down and split the ashes. I just did a quick Google search here to see what percentage of the North American population is narcissistic, and it says on a few different sources 158 million people in the U.S., and I think the U.S. population is what, 320?
Yeah, approximately
320,
330 or something like that. So like that's a good chunk of the population that is narcissistic, and I'd suspect the number's probably higher. Like, you see this unreasonable usage of social media today, and one of the definitions of narcissism is like, you know, I have to get constant attention and validation from other sources. And it's like you see this constantly on Instagram. And I mean, like, you travel anywhere to any kind of tourist destination, and they're doing dances with their friends for like a TikTok video and all this sort of stuff because they're fishing for likes and appreciation. I think 158 million is a pretty low count. So it's not common with everybody, but it sure as hell ain't uncommon. I mean, it's out there. I mean, right. You are going to run into narcissists throughout the course of your dating life, throughout the course, and I'll tell you something else. Like, I've dealt with narcissists in business as recently in the last couple of years as well. And you want to, like, as soon as you identify them, you want to walk away as quickly as possible. Just take whatever you need and get the hell out. If it's peanuts, take the peanuts and leave. It is not worth getting overly engaged and draining yourself to try to separate your business partnership from anybody like this. Trust me.
Right. The thing is, I just want to make a distinction between an overt narcissist, grandiose, with all the gold and the Rolex watches, and, they have to tell everybody how great they are. And within 10 minutes of meeting them, you know where they went to college or business school. And, they're just out to outdo everybody. This broadcast is really devoted to that covert narcissist. They are just an apex predator. And you don't know sometimes until you're too deep. So the gentleman who wrote the super chat about getting out after a year, congratulations. You are going to stay out of a divorce lawyer's office if you keep looking through the right lens. And that's the goal. You don't need the stress.
Let's grab the super chat here real quick from Sophia. Said narcissists were never mirrored properly by the mother as a child. John Bradshaw covers this. I've seen John's channel. You should check it out. Actually, he's real good. He compares it to the like of a toothache and a hole in their soul. Yeah, we talked about that. Paul, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, well, I'll jump in on that. So I hear a lot of questions coming in from the super chats, people wanting to know the origins. And I'm telling you that there's more unknown about that than there is known about that. Yeah. So, like, I just look at it from, this is kind of like how I came into sort of pickup and game before I got into evolutionary psychology and then later red pill theory, right? Or red pill theory and EvoPsych will tell you the why. At first, it's just like, I just want to learn how to communicate better with women and get better results. This is getting those results. I don't know why, but this is what's going to work. You kind of want to approach it like that. This is how I approach this problem. This is how they are. This is how it works. You can worry about the origins whenever on your own time, but there's going to be a lot of conflicting information about those origins, like daddy issues or not daddy, because the problem with that is you're going to try to look for things in their past history to try to guess if this person's like that, and then you're going to be wrong, and you're going to miss all the love bombing that's happening, and then you're going to find yourself in it. You know what I mean? And so it's just important to focus on the current behavior that she's exhibiting and that other stuff, because we don't really know. It's obviously a genetic component and something in their history, but are you really going to know all of those details from her? You're going to know what she tells you. Do you know what I mean? Which may or may not be accurate in how she's presenting it. So that's a little less important. Yeah, I lost my train of thought, so I'll stop.
No problem. So, John, I want to ask you, because I've got a few talking points here from a guy that Paul and I have been helping for the last couple months, and we've covered a few of them already. But he mentioned that you need to go for joint primary caregiver arrangements. So, whatever that's called where you live in your state or country. Here it's shared custody. In the UK, it might be called joint primary care. In the States, it's something else, obviously. But why is it important that you don't allow her to be the custodial parent to the children? Because, well, I mean, like we know, first of all, it's very hard to try to get that at a later date once the ink's dried and, you know, the agreement's in place. But why shouldn't you let her be the primary caregiver?
Well, there's two kinds of custody, at least in Pennsylvania. There's legal custody, where that deals with things like where they go to school, what religion they are, life, their education, you know, life questions. And then there's physical custody, which in Pennsylvania is where the child sleeps, where they put their head down and sleep through the night is where who has primary physical. So it's important because depending upon the law in your jurisdiction, and the laws are different in every jurisdiction, that person might be able to relocate. Now, in Pennsylvania, you can't relocate if you're locating a certain distance away. That could impair the other parent's ability to exercise their custodial rights. So in his jurisdiction, it may be more important for whatever reason.
So I understand. So you could be the legal guardian and make decisions about medical choices, religion, school, that sort of stuff. But the custodial parent could have the child 90% of the time, but you still have the right to make choices as far as school, religion, stuff like that, medical procedures, all that, right?
In Pennsylvania, yeah. Even if you're
that's interesting, because in most places it seems like both those things are aligned with whoever's the primary caregiver.
No, in Pennsylvania and maybe other jurisdictions, you could be incarcerated. And if you're my client, I'm going to fight to make sure you have legal custody, equal legal custody. If the kid needs an operation or, you know, but even if you're not incarcerated, if there's any dental appointment, you got to tell the other parent. If there's a medical appointment, if you want to switch schools or the report cards come out, you got to share it with the other parent. That's the way it should be, and that's the way it is here. It's different in every jurisdiction.
Yeah. The way that it works here is if the parent has a child more than 60% of the time, then they've obviously got the child, you know, at their residence for the most part, but it also gives them the right to make unilateral decisions pretty much with everything.
Yeah, not here. Not here at all.
So that's why it's important, guys, that if you're getting like divorced from somebody that's a narcissist, you are going to have a battle to try to untie that knot. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that I mean, like the whole point of being a parent and father and children is to have influence on them so that you can raise them, right? And you lose the right to have that influence if the other parent is a little off in the head and they decide to go do some bizarre things. There was a case in Texas, I think, John, you're probably familiar with, a guy that was fighting to make sure that his son wasn't chemically treated to become a girl because the mother wanted him to be a girl because she thought the child was a girl.
Horrible case, right?
Yeah, and he's got to pay her to go through the procedure. He's got to give her the money so that she can transition his son to a girl.
Terrible. Yeah, I read about that case a while ago.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're the custodial caregiver, then you're not going to have to put up with that fight. I mean, here anyway, both parents would have to agree if you're shared, but if you're the custodial parent, they can make the unilateral decisions without the other parent's consent, right? You want to hyphenate the last name. Let's say she's taking care of the child. She meets somebody else and wants to change the last name from your last name to his. Not much you can do about it, right? So you got to look at local laws and certainly talk to a lawyer when you're planning this. And if you've identified that you're married to a narcissist, do not do anything. Do not announce that you want a divorce. Do not make any, verbal announcements that it's over until you do some planning in advance, especially with a licensed lawyer in your area.
I agree. Even if you're not married to a narcissist and you want to get divorced, get a strategy together.
Yeah, definitely
can never
put
hurt.
a plan together. But for absolute certainty, you must do it if you're going to get out of the marriage with a narcissist, because it will be difficult for you. We got another 10 minutes or so left in this broadcast. John, you got a few more points here. Did you want to cover them?
Yeah,
we were talking about devaluing and then the discard phase.
Yeah, I mean, if you're ever entangled with a narcissist, you're going to know when these critical barbs start to come out of their mouth toward you. They're not going to like your haircut. They're not going to like your jeans. They're not going to like so much about who you are. This is after love bombing you. So that is, the mask is starting to peel off because they need that superior position, that almighty, I'm above you, I'm better than you. The truth is that I have had the unpleasant experience of dating women who are narcissists. And it's almost a joke when you listen to what they say to you. If you're a high value guy or you have your act together, I liken it to if someone were an 8th degree black belt in jujitsu and a middle school child came up to them and wanted to fight them, you would just say, that's ridiculous. You wouldn't even engage them. So my advice is listen and observe and put yourself in that position where if you do get tangled up with a narcissist, that you're in a position to just do what that 8th degree black belt does to a middle schooler who might want to come up and fight him. You don't even engage because they're dying to engage you. You're maddening them. It's kryptonite when you don't engage with their nonsense. That drives them crazy. Now, of course, you're planning an exit strategy too, because you don't need the stress, but it's amazing. Some of the things they say and do after love bombing you, it's almost surreal. That's just from my own experiences.
Let me grab the super chat here from Dave. He said, they're like chameleons, had a 12-year relationship with a covert, no close female friends, but many exes still as friends. Love bombing lasted 2 years. Any woman that keeps men around from her past is a big red flag, guys. I'm not suggesting that's tied into narcissism, but it's a red flag, 100%.
Well, it can be though, because they will go back to sources for supply. You know what I mean? So they will. I mean, once they've discarded, some will discard and never even. It's like you're dead to them. But a lot of times they'll think you eke out a little bit of more supply from you, send you that random text a year later. Do you know what I mean? Or try to, they'll do that and try to get you to put effort, time, energy at your expense into them again. So they like to keep exes around for that. And they need that constant validation. I'm so pretty, I'm so hot, look at me. I had heard from one who I would assess as probably narcissistic, had said that she liked to keep her exes around on social media and maintain those so that they would see how great she's doing and forever regret ever having screwed up with her. Think about how sinister and terrible of a person you would have to be to think that way. I don't think about my exes like I want to destroy their lives and have them watch me on social media and forever regret this, you know what I mean? Who thinks like that? But these people think like that.
Yeah, I think the term.
So just to hit on that point again, because I feel like I'm going to be mentioning this, like a few times on broadcast, because it's such an important, it's such a true statement. He's just a friend. Okay, then let's text him. You wanna, and see what he says. That's the way that you handle that. It's just cut and dry. Like, you don't entertain games like that. It's straightforward and honest in that sense. Anonymous, thanks for the great work, guys. And got another super chat here. Great to see Mr. Noble back. He's a straight fire. How do you deal with entitled? So this question to you, John, is how do you deal with entitled new generation girls who think they deserve too much? What's your view on that?
Yeah, I mean, you got to really do a good job as a father to make sure that your daughters are raised the right way. They got their head on straight. But if you're out in the dating marketplace, I could only really speak for women maybe 38 and older, because that's my bracket. And, it's on a case-by-case basis. Don't put up with anybody's nonsense. You're going to get love bombed. You might feel like you've never felt before, but you better make sure that you're vetting. Be patient. Take your time. Don't rush into anything, whether it's a committed relationship, certainly not a marriage. Your chemicals aren't straight for like a year or more when you start to date somebody that you're really into. So again, nothing can replace looking through a clear lens, and taking it on a case-by-case basis. Trust your gut also. Baby, that thing is in there for a reason. And if something doesn't seem right or off, dig a little deeper. Don't be afraid.
I just want to add to that because I had a call earlier today with a guy that was, I'm not going to describe why he was about as alpha as they could have ever come in his prior relationship. But what I will tell you was he went from that part to a guy that was so betatized, he ended up getting involved with a single mom, raising her 2 kids for a couple of years, and then found out within a reasonable period of time that his best friend was laying pipe with his girlfriend. That's how betatized he became so quickly on the other side of the coin. So you have to vet yourself too. It's not just, looking for the red flags and vetting, but are you in a position to identify this stuff, right? Like, is this something that you've gotten good at? Do you make choices based on mental point of origin? Like, is this good for me? Like, how does this serve me? Like, are you able to answer those questions? Because you can move through the entire spectrum of alpha seed all the way down to beta need, and you definitely don't want to go to where this dude went to, because it's a difficult place to unplug from it. It takes a lot of work to get yourself to a position of like a feel-good mode again. Before we wrap up, Paul, is there anything else that you want to say in the next couple of minutes? We got about 2 or 3 minutes for you to drop some last final thoughts before I just kind of go through the closing notes.
Yeah. There's so many thoughts on this topic. We do like several episodes, but I will say, like, for prevention too, it seems like a lot of guys are interested in that. Okay, when you blow a girl's mind like completely, which I know I'm not judging the audience here, but large percent of the audience doesn't know what that looks like. All right, that's just reality. But when you blow a girl's mind for real, she goes through kind of an existential crisis in her head. If she's a healthy person, she doesn't just go, oh, I can start love bombing you right away, because a woman's existential threat from an evil psych perspective is being alpha widowed, is being discarded by the best she can get. And so if you blow her mind right away, she's going to go, oh, you know what I mean? I better be, is this guy going to discard me? And then she's going to be a little bit cautious. She's not just going to just start within the first week or after the first couple of lays, after she throws copious amounts of sex at you, first couple of weeks telling you that she loves you, wanting to see you all the time, you're the greatest, you're the best. That stuff doesn't happen with a healthy woman. Even when you blow her mind, I mean, you'll see resistance. She'll tell you things. She'll be telling you, like, how, and showing you through actions how attracted and aroused she is by you, but she'll be holding back because she'll be concerned about rejection. You know what I mean? Whereas someone who's love bombing is doing it as a strategy. So they're not that concerned about rejection. You know what I mean? And that's exactly. So that's just important to kind of take note of when you'll notice the difference. If you are spinning a lot of plates, you'll notice that difference. You know what I mean? So that's a little preventative thing for you guys, is to really recognize it during that early phase and recognize it for what it is.
All right, gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining me on this one. Let me just go full screen here and do some closing items. I've got a bunch of stuff coming out this week and some really, really good red meat for you later on in this week. It's like the most accurate definition of alpha seed versus beta need, and I'm going to break down something probably by Friday or so later on this week. Quick shout out to the channel sponsor over my shoulder here, the Grondike Soap Company Tactical Soap. Let me grab the banner and just drop it down there. You guys are showering anyway, so might as well grab some stuff that helps support the creation of content of this channel. Tactical Soap and Beard Oil is pheromone infused and will help you a little bit on the sexual marketplace, a little bit of an advantage. If you use coupon code Cooper at checkout, you get 10% off. And just down over here, boom, just go to coopersoap.com, or you can click the link after this renders. I'll drop it in the top pinned comment. Guys, thanks for watching Before the Train Wreck. It's about the only show on the internet today that drops cold hard truth bombs that helps you guys make better choices so you don't make a train wreck out of your life. Looking forward to seeing both you guys on the broadcast again in the future.
My pleasure.
I think we covered some great stuff for you guys. Leave a comment below if you have any topic suggestions. Let me just remove this here. So you can find Jonathan on Twitter at JCN Law, as you can see in his little
and Instagram.
yeah.
Too.
Oh, and Instagram. And you've also got Paul on Apex Mindset on YouTube. I think I saw you post a YouTube link earlier today, Jonathan. Are you on YouTube as well?
I am. I started a YouTube channel, and I'm loving it. And hopefully, we get the message out and change some lives.
Awesome. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Smash the like button. Leave me a comment below. We'll see you guys next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard for the next Before the Train Wreck. Got lots of stuff coming out this week. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel and hit the notification bell. I know a lot of you guys watch unsubscribed. It helps me out a ton if you hit the subscription button. Sometimes YouTube has a nasty habit of unsubscribing people. Just check it and make sure it's ticked off. We'll see you guys in the next one.